Good afternoon, friends, neighbors, countrymen, barrel-chested freedom fighters from all around the world, and welcome to another edition of Tales from Patrol Base. Got the old paratrooper here, and normally I talk about the Army's long-range surveillance units and the guys that are in that, but we're really fortunate today. I have an old friend and is in the United States. His name is Corneilous Oothuizen, or CJ, or Wussy, and he, in the 1980s, he was probably a member of what was, in the 1980s, the premier special operations unit in the world, the little known South African Special Forces, also known as the Recce. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about that. And man, his life, it reads like an adventure novel, because not just growing up in South Africa fighting in the Bush War, he is also a professional hunter. He has his own safari company, and he's here in the States for the Dallas Safari Club convention next weekend. And just a phenomenal guy and a great friend. And Cornelius, it is a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Morning, Jerry. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be here and talking to you and your friends.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, man, just so we can kind of give you a background, can you tell a little bit how you grew up in South Africa and what was your path into the military and kind of how all that happened?
Yeah, certainly. I grew up in the northeastern part of South Africa, very close to Kruger National Park, which is famous, and a lot of people know about the Kruger National Park. And we were farmers, well, very poor people at that time. Well, I would say about 99% of South Africa were still poor people and building up a great country at that time, and still is sort of. So yeah, and because we were poor, since we were 7 years old going to school, we were in boarding school until I finished school 12 years later. And then when we finished school, every white young male had to go for compulsory 2 years military training. So at that time, you had a choice. You could first go and study, or you could first do your military 2 years military, which is compulsory. If you don't go, they would lock you up in jail for 2 years because of the onslaught. That time, communist was a big problem. And because in 1975, Angola and Mozambique right to our eastern boundary of South Africa, fall to Marxist state from Portuguese colonies. They were supported by Russia, mainly Russia, and they were communist. They turned into communist states overnight. And Angola, which is just north up from Namibia, or those days Southwest Africa, same happened there. So we had from two angles, communist supported by Russia coming down, and South Africa was right in the market because of our minerals and fast resources, which was in abundance. So that was a country that they were heading for. Well, that's what we believed at the time. So yeah,
and Rhodesia was right to the north. They were fighting their own insurgency as well.
Yeah, at that time, well, since the late 1960s, Rhodesia was fighting insurgencies from two sides, from Mozambique and from Zambia, which was east and west of Rhodesia at that time. So yeah, so we all grew up from small. I mean, my father was in the National Guard, which we used to call a commando system. And once a week, they would go out and do night patrols and roadblocks and things. And they were issued with LAR rifles at the time. So since small, our gauge was, sort of safety was a primary concern for foreign insurgents into our country. And later on, of course, that escalated a lot, where you had landmines on the farms, blowing up normal civilian people, even in shopping malls or in bars and restaurants where that occurred. And in the 80s, that just escalated. Under the current government, which is the ANC, African National Congress, they had their military wing, which was called Corneilous Oothuizen. So, yeah, they were active in South Africa. And at that time, I was called up to go to artillery and to be a gunner. And since day one, I was moved into 120 millimeter mortar group. And part of that was like, I had to go and do parachute training, because we used to jump with that mortars. So and after some time, I said, well, this is getting boring, because we're not going to the border at that time. the border was sort of the northern part of Namibia, because there was insurgency from Namibia from Angola into Namibia. And then a friend of mine said, well, let's visit some friends I got in Pretoria, little known to me. This guy was a colonel, and we ended up, and those days, you didn't mix with those people, but he was in school with my daddy. I didn't know anything about that.
Oh, wow.
So when we got there, he said, well, where you come from? I said, well, from there, a small little village. And he said, well, was your dad in high school at this place? I said, yes, sir. So, well, I know your dad, give me a number. So he called him my dad. And that was after, what, 20 years that haven't seen each other.
Wow.
So, but he said to us, guys, why did you go in special forces? We said, what is that? Because it was very secretive. Nobody knew about that at that time. And he said, no, I'll write a letter, and you guys have to do some tests, medical tests and psychological tests to see if you fit enough. And we said, yes, please, we'd love to do that. And you're right. And he said, take this letter back on Monday when you're back in your unit, because we had a weekend pass. And that's what we did. And next thing, we're on a train, and and then I ended up, from there jumping back and to Special Forces school. It was at a young age, just after school, after graduated from high school, and that was an awesome career. Training sort of was over a period of 1 year, and you had to pass all the different courses, which I don't want to elaborate on everything now, but it's something of everything. And at the end of the year, I was lucky to be the number 8 guy of my group that graduated. We were only 8 that graduated after a group of 240 that started selection about a year earlier on.
So from your class, you started selection 240, graduated 8 guys, got the operator badge, and you maroon. So y'all wore a maroon beret.
At that time it was still a green beret.
Oh,
and we didn't have badges. Only about 1984, 85. We said we need to, to get a badge and get unit pride and a proper beret. And so the guys came up with the compass rose, which was and a dagger. That was our badge with a separate number on your badge. And so wherever you go in the world, because well, the two of us served together in Iraq. There was about 5,000 South African Special Forces guys, which in hindsight, I think up to today, there's not even 1,400 that qualified.
Well, it was kind of like those 10,000 Navy SEALs we met too.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. So, and then, as I said, when I joined up, they said to me, you're too small. You can't be part of Special Forces. Because the guys were quite muscular and big. And then I said, well, let's see. And it was good training and by listening to instructors, and we were super fit. We were extremely super fit. I mean, the day would start 2 hours of physical PT in the morning, and when we knocked off late afternoon, I'll go back and do more road running or back to the gym, and by that way, and just paying attention to the instructors. We were lucky; we had extremely good instructors. We would just look what they do and keep on training and remembering what we did, and all about muscle memory. And so I was lucky to graduate. And at that time, because at the last exercise was an escape and evasion exercise, and I did listen to the lead instructor, which was the course leader. He said, when you get caught, escape as soon as possible. And that's what we did. Oh, and then they get pissed off with us for escaping. We needed to end it up the course. We were up for 2 months in the Eastern Caprivi or Western Caprivi. That's where we did the final fire and movement, base attacks and aircraft attacks and everything that we taught throughout the year. It was a combination, and it just ended up, together. So, but they beat us up badly that we could not go for an operation directly after that. We were heading back to Durban to recover, and so it was just the next year that I ended up going into a first mission.
Now was I remember you. I think you told me one time you were in 5. Was it 5 Recce? Or
no, I was based at the number 1 Recce.
Number 1.
And then my last 6 months, I was transferred to go to Recce, which is not far from my home, just an hour's drive where I
Oh,
grew up.
okay.
Yeah.
And just for our viewers, you're like, no, you've got like a number one Recce is
Yeah,
the
that was a mother unit. When after we formed, we actually formed at the infantry unit down in the Cape, Western Cape,
yeah.
at Oosthuizen, which was the infantry place where we trained leadership, etc., etc. But then in the late 70s, we moved to the Bluff,
Yeah.
where one Recce was formed, and later on we had the training wing attached to one Recce. And then from one Recce, we created 4 Recce, which was based on the western coast at Langebaan, which is about 2-hour drive north from Cape Town. And then we formed 5 Recce, which was in the northeast of the country, close to my home, and virtually on the border of the Kruger National Park.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so basically most of your mission was direct action and reconnaissance. And you did do some foreign internal defense too. I remember talking about that.
Yeah, well, look, basically it was, we call it big army, but they will define that we need information on a target, or they will come up with targets to hit. In the beginning, we were part of a joint group with other special forces like 3-2 Battalion that did excellent work. They were used for base attacks and things. But after a hectic firefight and a big attack on the base of Recce, they decided that this is not special forces jobs. We got raids and things to do. We don't want to waste our guys, because a couple of guys got killed in that raid. Not a raid, but it was a frontal base attack, which was a little bit wrong, but the guys fought it through, and we got through that.
So
now afterwards,
is this in Angola?
Sorry.
Or
yeah, no, that was southeast Angola.
Okay.
Most of the jobs were into Angola. Most of them. A couple of pseudo jobs was in Namibia, the north part of Namibia, where we would turn up like terrorists and blacken out and wear the same uniforms and everything the same. And at nighttime, try to link up with other terrorists in the rural areas where, the folks were staying, because that's where they would come to recruit youngsters to take them back to Angola, train them up and send them back to fight the forces in Namibia.
You were doing kind of like a Pseudoops, kind of like a Celia Scouts were doing, or in Rhodesia?
Exactly the same. We got that concept from Rhodesia, where it worked very well. And for us, it worked very well. We had some good, tasks accomplished by Pseudoops and get information. And from that, we would get guys and get the name list of all the other people that's been recruited. Because they were recruited from Namibia, sent back to Angola to do training, and then back into Namibia. You can't say he's a terrorist because he was a Namibia citizen.
Yeah.
But at nighttime, they'll go back to a cache where they stashed landmines and things and plant it, things like that, or lay ambush and then disappeared, hide their weapons, go back to the village, and work the fields, plant corn and things like that. So, but with those lists that we get, we could go and arrest people and get more information. Who's the paymaster? Who's the detachment leader? Things like that. And now, go ahead.
So you had a mission cycle. You were rolling up bad guys, getting the intel, using that to roll more bad guys.
Pretty much. We'll turn their minds in less than a day and take them back on a mission and go and get out caches and things like that and take them with us in operations.
Yeah. Wow.
And there was never in our history one guy that turned them back on us. But we treated them well. And they knew that there was a future beyond or getting killed by the forces.
Yeah, let's see. That was that the guys coming in Namibia was SWAPO, right?
That was SWAPO, Southwest Africa People's Organization.
Yeah.
But all trained up by the Russians in Angola.
Yeah. Well, they were all was it FMLN, which took over Angola from the Portuguese. Yeah,
no, it was not FNLA tried to Antonita, but it was MPLA.
MPLA, that's right.
MPLA,
Yeah.
Under the guidance of course, the Russians and communist ideologies. And then as soon as we started in 1974, 75 to go up into Angola, Also, the Cubans got involved because they had other ideas. They had
Mhm.
people that they want to send out of Cuba, but in exchange, they will destroy the sugarcane fields in Angola.
Yeah.
And for that matter,
That would
Angola
drive
need
up
to
prices.
import sugar, and Cuba could get cheap oil from Angola.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember we were sitting down one night, drinking demon rum.
Oh man,
And
don't tell.
you were, and here's a great story. You were telling me about Meg hunting in Angola.
Oh, look, we had a number of roles to play, from blowing up bridges, blowing up fuel tanks, destroying railway lines, mountain passes, to prevent the people from getting logistics to the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then not only shooting down MiGs or helicopters, but also shoot down cargo aircraft.
Yeah.
So we were deployed with, unfortunately, not with your Stinger missiles, which you guys, America, supported UNITA, which is
Yeah.
one of the pro-Western organizations, guerrilla
Jonas
forces.
Savimbi's.
Yeah, which we helped train a lot of times, but we were not allowed to see the Stinger missiles, and they kept to their promise. We never could get close to that.
Yeah.
And the war would have turned completely different if we had those missiles. But
Yeah.
we put up with SAM-7 missiles, which are completely outdated. But
Yeah.
we did a good job. The guy shot down a couple of MiGs and a couple of aircrafts, and also some attack helicopters
Yeah. That's pretty
with that.
impressive.
And yeah, we were lucky that we were able to do that. And but not only that, we would also follow big convoys, up to 200 vehicles at a time. And at
Mhm.
nighttime, the guys will sneak closer, see where's the beginning and the end of the convoy, and put up flares. And as they were putting up flares, they will send the SITRAP down South Africa, well, to Namibia, and get our aircraft coming in because from the air they will set off the flares, and they could see there's the line. And on that line, they could just hit the targets and destroy lots and lots of vehicles.
Mhm.
And that's demoralizing for the enemy, because if you do not get weapons and ammunition and food to the front line, the guys start to go mad and morale go down, and that's what you want. You want to
Well,
create chaos.
didn't South Africa actually capture a Russian advisor at one point in Angola?
A couple of Russian advisors.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we did. And we exchanged them later on for that one special forces guy that got captured in Cabinda.
Yeah. That was when didn't they go shoot up an oil refinery or blow up an oil refinery?
That was the plan. We
Yeah.
did blow up a couple of them, but that one didn't materialize. Things were changed on the last minute, which, well, I don't want to elaborate on that, but you can
Things
know
happen. Things
that
happen.
that
Friction of
was a
war.
Chevron installation.
Yeah. Yeah. The friction of war.
Yeah. And,
You,
there was ExxonMobil, Chevron, and I think BP was in Angola those
yeah.
years. Although it was a Marxist government, the US were helping UNITA fighting the government, but they were buying oil and exploring oil from that country. So, there's a lot of things happened, but we don't have any idea what is going on behind the screens.
I know. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It was a good time.
Well, another story you told me about y'all, another mission you all did. You all hit like over 10 objectives in a country simultaneously, and
Yeah, look,
it was an
we
awesome story.
we after some time realized that there's not only bush war. We had to adopt tactics because the ANC and the military wing, which was called MK, Mkonto were using other countries with safe houses like Botswana, like Mozambique, and not so much in Zimbabwe, but also up into Zambia, where they had safe houses to travel through, to come close and then infiltrate, because the border is a long border. From there, they could infiltrate back in South Africa, because those terrorists were all born and bred in South Africa. They went abroad to Russia, got their training, and then came back.
Mm-hmm.
And they had their ways to get arms and ammunition into South Africa, which I will a little bit later just show you one example of how they did it. But yeah, so we had all over, we had our intel network, which was not easy at the time. You must remember, for a white South African to go into a country which is 99% black and not to be followed, to be, looked upon, say, hey, what are you guys doing here? The
Mm-hmm.
guys had to be smart and So, but yeah, we had information, and that's what we did. At one night, we hit 10 targets simultaneously in Botswana. That was safe houses, and got out safe without getting caught by the Botswana police. And Botswana was a good country, make no mistake. And at the time, I do not think that Botswana knew that that was safe houses, that the Botswana government knew about it.
Yeah.
But the ANC guys had a lot of money donated by European countries and by other people, and the UK, of course. So they were rich. They were, they had money to buy and rent houses and do whatever they needed. And
Yeah.
while we're on that topic, well, me and you were working up in the dust pit back in Iraq. I met a guy there which was doing logistical work on Camp Dublin.
Yeah.
And way back, he was doing tours, backlander safaris from the UK right through Africa to South Africa.
Really?
And he said to me, when we were in Zambia, in the capital Lusaka, there was a safe house. Well, he said, well, the vehicle, which is an old British Army Bedford, military vehicle, had to go in for a service. But what he didn't know at the time, only years later he was told, because he was only a tour guide that wanted some adventure, so he took backpackers through Africa. They had a special apartment between the chassis where they could stash weapons and ammunition.
Yeah.
So in Zambia and Lusaka, they were loaded up, and because the vehicle had to go to the specific place for an oil change and to service the engine. So and back in South Africa, it was the same. Today, you need to take that vehicle there from check up to see that everything is fine.
Yeah.
That's how they brought in weapons and ammunition into South Africa, to different safe houses.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, as I said, that was more than 12, 14 years later that I found that out.
Well, it's a small world, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but there was a lot of missions, but at the end, it was more urban warfare. As they come to attack more and more urban, targets, where it was not only against our military, but they would set off in big shopping malls in Durban and all over South Africa, put up bombs and with timers. And they also attacked at one time a pub in Durban, which we frequently visited. At that time, we were out for operational duties. We were not there.
Yeah.
The Magoo's bar was timed and bombed, but none of us were there, luckily. But yeah, we had fun. There was so much things to do. As I said, different type of operations. Attack divers from Recce would go and blew up boats in the harbors of Angola. We would go and blow up trains and huge fuel tanks on the Angolan coast.
Weren't we driving through Mozambique one time? We were going up to the lease, and you said, "Yeah, I laid a minefield there, or I put a mine in on this road, or something."
No, that was just before my time. That was out. The Recce's helped Rhodesians to fight, and there was an offensive from the southeast of Rhodesia. That was directly where our farm is. That lease is now. So there's a huge railway line, and our guys went in there and lay ambushes and blew up the train and things like that, and blew up bridges so they could not bring in supplies to the front line.
Yeah,
so that and disrupt the enemies, because that enemies will come into Rhodesia at the time and to attack farmers. I mean, remember, Rhodesia had a lot of problems. Even shot down the 2 aircraft that took off from Victoria Falls. That was full of civilians.
Yeah. I tell you, hey, Corneilous, can I take a break I'm going to take a pause here.